What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards, old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. This week on Not Your Average Meta, we have the last game in our 3-part International MTG series featuring the turn of Eddy and Chris. First up this week, we have Eddy playing Torens Fist to the Angels. This is a deck built completely out of cards from Standard with a heavy focus on creature tokens. With this deck, Eddy's looking to swarm the board with tokens and overtake his opponents with a go-wide strategy. Next, we have Chris bringing his own Selesnya deck to the table, being led by Katilda's Dawnhart Prime. This deck is a human tribal deck built around using +1/+1 counter synergies to overrun his opponents for a win. Then we have Justin playing Marchesa the Black Rose, the only deck that doesn't include green in this matchup. With this deck, Justin is looking to take advantage of Marchesa and her dethrone granting ability for ultimate ETP value. Finally, we have Foggerl playing his current favorite deck, Reki, the History of Kamigawa. This is a Legendary Matters deck that looks to take advantage of Reki's card drawing ability by dropping in legendary creatures in order to get that green stompy win. Now that we're fighters, let's step back into the International MTG warehouse and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Chris lives the dream and plays a forest and drops in that turn 1 Soul Ring. Justin draws and plays an island for turn. Fog draws and plays a forest before passing. Eddy draws and plays an Evolving Wilds, cracking it to go get a basic and passes. Chris draws and then plays a Plains for turn. He then pays 4 and casts a Keeper of the Accord. Justin draws and plays a tap Bashuka Bog, exiling Eddy's Evolving Wilds. Fog draws and plays another forest before passing. Eddy draws and plays a Snow-Covered Plains and then pays 2 for a Tangled Florahedron. Chris draws for turn and plays a Boulder Loft Pathway. He then plays a Grand Arbiter and goes to combat, swinging his Keepered Fog for 3 damage. Justin draws and discards down to hand size. Fog draws and plays a Gyroot Sanitarium, then pays 3 to cast his commander, Reki, the History of Kamigawa. Eddy draws and plays a tapped Kabira Plateau for turn, and then pays 2 to cast Katilda, Dawnhart Prime. Chris draws and taps out to cast Cathar's Crusade. He then goes to combat and this time swings his keeper Justin for 3 damage. Justin draws and sadly discards down to hand size again. Fog draws and plays a forest before paying 3 to cast Nissa Vastwood Seer. He then draws off his Reki trigger and goes to find forest from his library, putting it to hand. Eddy plays a Plains for turn, then pays 3 to cast his commander Torens Fist of the Angel. He then pays an additional 1 to cast Paladin class before tapping 2 creatures to cast Trelasala Moondancer. On his upkeep, Chris's keeper triggers, giving him a soldier token, which puts a 1/1 counter on each of his creatures. Chris then draws for turn and plays a Wooded Bastion before casting his commander Katilda, which puts another 1/1 counter on each of his creatures. He then casts Thalia's Lieutenant, putting more +1/+1 counters on all of his creatures, and then goes to combat and swings his keeper Eddy for 7 damage. Justin draws for turn and finally gets another land. He then plays Dimir Aqueduct, bouncing an island back to hand. Fog draws for turn and plays a forest. He then pays 2 for Umezawa's Jitte, drawing off Reki. Fog then casts Growing Rights of Itlimoc, drawing off Reki, before he looks at his top 4 cards of his library, not finding a creature. Eddy draws and then pays 2 to cast Return to Nature, destroying Chris's Cathar's Crusade. He then pays 2 to cast Outland Liberator, creating a soldier token of training, before paying the 1 to sacrifice a Liberator to destroy Fog's Jitte. Eddy then taps 2 more humans to level up Paladin class and passes. Chris creates another soldier token on his upkeep and draws for turn. He then pays 3 to cast an Eternal Witness, returning the Cathar's Crusade to hand. Chris then pays 5 to recast the Crusade before swinging his Abolisher Justin for 6 damage. Justin draws for turn and replays his island before casting a Commander Sphere. Fog draws for turn and plays Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. He then pays 6 for the Immortal Sun, drawing off Reki and passes turn. Eddy draws and pays 2 for Rights of Harmony before tapping out to cast Amiria's Call. He then creates 2 4/4 Angels while drawing 2 cards. On his upkeep, Chris puts a soldier token into play, putting a 1/1 counter on each of his creatures. Chris draws and then pays 6 for an Avabrock Caretaker, putting an additional 1/1 counter on each of his creatures. He then mistakenly taps his soldiers, who aren't humans, for mana in order to cast Glorious Sunrise. Chris then goes to combat, swinging his keeper at Fog, Katilda at Justin, and the rest of his tokens at Eddy. Everybody declares no blocks and takes their damage. Justin draws for turn and then taps out to cast Sludge Monster, turning Chris's keeper into a sludge. Fog draws 2 cards for turn and then plays Yavimaya Hollow. Nissa then flips over and Fog casts Kamal's Druidic Vow for 6, drawing off Reki. He then reveals his top 6 cards, putting Kanda's Banner, Azusa Lost But Seeking, a Via Pashiri, and a Force into play. He then casts Joriel, Molvali Recluse for 2, drawing off Reki, and then Sereth, the Viper's Fang, drawing off Reki again and creating a 2/2 cat token. Fog then ends his turn, flipping his Growing Rights into Ilmog, Cradle of the Sun. Eddy draws and then pays 2 for an Arcane Signet. He then pays to uptick his Paladin class and goes to combat, swinging all of his angels at Chris and the rest of his creatures at Nissa in order to pump up his angel token off the Paladin class trigger. Nissa then dies and Chris takes his 22 damage. Chris draws for turn and then pays 3 to cast Savior of Olembach, which puts a +1/+1 counter on each of his creatures. He then pays another 3 to cast a Spear of Heliod. Chris then gets revenge on Eddy by going to combat with enough damage to take him out of the game, while he attacks both Justin and Fog for 8 damage apiece. Justin draws for turn and plays a Mountain before tapping out to cast his commander Marchesa. He then goes to combat and swings the Sludge monster at Chris, turning his Arbiter into a Sludge, while also triggering Marchesa's Dethrone ability, giving him a +1/+1 counter. Chris then blocks the Sludge monster, sending him to the graveyard. On his end step, Marchesa triggers, bringing the Sludge monster back into play, which turns Chris's commander into a Sludge. Fog untaps for turn and draws 2 cards. He then casts Hero's Podium, drawing off Reki, and creates another cat token. Fog then casts Goreclaw, drawing off Reki again, and then plays Nykthos as his land for turn. He then pays to activate Nykthos for 6 green mana and casts a Worldly Tutor to go find a creature and put it on top of his library. Fog then activates Ilmog to create 6 more green mana to cast God Eternal Ronus, drawing off Reki, while doubling all of his creatures' power when he enters the battlefield. He then casts Nalia, God of the Hunt, giving all of his creatures trample, and draws off Reki again. Fog then casts ISO, Enlighten Bushi, and once again draws off Reki. Fog then plays Gemstone Caverns as a second land and decides he has enough power on board to go to combat and swings out at both Chris and Justin for that green stompy win.
Alright, we have Fog right here playing his mono green Reki deck. How's it feel to win another game with that deck?
Mono green's pretty cool. We brought that violent speed and also momentum today. No, very underestimated by me, myself. So I surprise myself every time. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you can see more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.